A very good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another excellent health and safety webinar brought to you by SIOSH, the South African Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. This morning, we are looking forward to part two of a six-part series that is offered to us by Protector Safety Gear. All to do with working at height and working at height safety and what gear to be used, etc. So the first one took place a couple of weeks ago, very well attended. We had over 1,000 persons registered, and this one is no exception. And we are looking forward to this great webinar. Just quickly, SIOSH is a SACWA recognized professional body. We have 3 professional designations that are registered on the NQF. Namely Technical Health and Safety Officer, Graduate Health and Safety Practitioner, and Chartered Health and Safety Professional. So that is professional designations that is awarded to you based on qualifications and experience, and you are then registered by SIOSH to demonstrate to employers, peers, and clients your competency level in the field of occupational health and safety. Just a couple of announcements regarding this webinar. It is CPD verified by SIOSH with 1 CPD point. Members of SIOSH, and by the way, also welcome to non-members that's here online this morning. If you are in the field of occupational health and safety and you are not yet registered with SIOSH, you cannot afford not to be. So please visit our website at siosh.co.za and find out about registration. So our members that are registered for their professional development will receive 1 CPD point for this webinar. Members are au fait with how to claim the CPD point. You simply go onto your online profile and you go to the CPD development section and you actually claim the 1 CPD. This session is recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel for if you want to refer anyone else to go and have a look at it, or if someone couldn't make it today, it will be on our YouTube channel. Obviously, Protector will also be given the video, and I'm sure they will share it with their clients as well. The presentation itself will be emailed directly to our SIOSH members, so the presentation itself will also be made available. And for those that want some form of proof of attendance, you will receive the following day. In other words, tomorrow you will receive a proof email that you have attended. I'm not saying that you must do anything with this email. It's just record that you actually have attended for your own personal development. And please note that this webinar is not verified by SACP CMP for those that's in the construction business, but please make use of the proof email and see if you can claim your any credits from SACP CMP. The main thing is that for SIOSH members, this is CPD verified. So attendance email, proof of attendance email will be emailed to you tomorrow. And then lastly, some house rules with regard to the chat box and the Q&A. Please note, members, that the chat box is for exactly what it is to meet and greet and maybe chat to one another, but mainly to meet and greet. The Q&A, please use the Q&A only for questions, and I repeat, only for questions related to the presenter and the presentation this morning. And can I also ask that you perhaps do not fire away with the questions at the beginning of the presentation. Dylan is an excellent presenter. He knows his topic, and I'm sure that somewhere along the line, your question will be answered if you post it too early. But please feel free to post questions, and we'll only concentrate on questions that's posted in the Q&A this morning. Right, very quickly, Protector Safety Gear is proudly a corporate member of SIOSH, and they are a prominent South African provider of personal protective equipment and workwear and specialized in fall protection systems. The company offers several key products and services. The first key product or service is equipment supply. They are a major distributor of industrial safety gear, partnering with global and local brands like 3M, Uvex, Rebel, Neptune, and Sweetall. Work at Height Training, as an official 3M training provider of Africa, they operate a state-of-the-art training facility for fall protection and industrial rope access. The equipment, they do a full turnkey fall protection service offering. They offer equipment servicing, installations, and inspections, including the recertification of fall arrest gear. So this morning, we're going to the second part of the topic. The first one that was well received was called Selecting the Right Anchor Points on Your Site. As indicated, that webinar is, that recording of the webinar is already on our YouTube channel. If you missed it, you can go and look at it. Very great webinar presented by Dylan as well. And this morning's topic will be fall rescue, the very important one. What really happens, obviously, when you fall or in a fall position, and how do one respond correctly? Now, Dylan Sutherland is the General Manager of Protector, with over 15 years of fall protection knowledge and education and support by a team committed to continuously learning. Dylan and Protector aims to help clients keep their employees safe while adding value through practical, fit-for-purpose safety solutions. Dylan, it's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you back again for part 2 of this very exciting webinar series. Over to you, and have a great one. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nielsen, Gareth. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I think just in starting to echo the sentiment, the first webinar really seems to have helped. There was a lot of good engagement from it. So I hope this one does the same, and I hope we cover the points. Just like the last one, it is quite tricky, and I must start off by saying it's always difficult to try to fit everything into one session. We've got probably just over an hour. We try and make it hit as many points as we can. But if we don't, we're also available to discuss afterwards. Our business is focused on protecting people. So if there's something that wasn't covered, please feel free to reach out. That's our business. So yeah, let's get into it. So today we're talking about the rescue side of fall protection. Obviously, we need to be connected first. So last topic was the anchor points. We need to make sure we've got our anchor points selected. We need to make sure that the anchor points can work. If we get that right, that's just the first stage. That makes sure we don't hit the ground. So today what we're going to talk about is how do we make sure that in the event of a fall and the equipment works, how do we successfully actually protect that person from any further damage or danger? Apologies to everybody that was part of the first one. As I promised in that discussion, every single talk I do this year, I will talk about the statistic because I think it's extremely vital. So once again, it's the same stats from last time. What we did is 2015 versus 2025, we took FEM's statistics specifically about falling onto different levels and falling onto the same level. So we're trying to just isolate it to fall protection. And the conversation that I think we need to have is there's a hidden statistic that we don't really look too much at. And that is, we look at the number of accidents, and what we'll see is from 2015 to 2025, we've gone from 1,200 to 900, which is phenomenal. That's a 25% better. We've decreased that number by 25%. It's going in the right direction, but it's because we focus on that. It's obviously quite often spoken about on sites and in safety discussions. The second one is lost days. When we talk about lost days, 2015, we were around 10,000. 2025 was about 8,000. So again, we've dropped that by about 21%. Phenomenal. Again, this is a hot topic that gets discussed in toolbox talks, in safety meetings, in any kind of safety engagement, which I assume is why it's moving in that direction. Fatalities, same story. We've gone from 10 to 7 on those 2 work at heights activities, which is a 30% decrease, which again, phenomenal. We really want that. There is, however, a problem where when we talk about permanent disabilities, that isn't moving in the same direction as the previous 3 stats. And in the same periods, we've gone from 123 in 2015 to 201 in 2025 permanent disabilities. Now, again, the issue is it's from a permanent disability point, generally the person that is getting injured and being impacted by that is the breadwinner. Generally, that's the person that is supporting a complete system, a complete family. And ultimately, they are being relied on by their family. So that increase of, call it 60, 70 humans is actually probably 70 times 4 or times 8, because they have many dependents on them. And for me, that is something we need to look at. And we need to discuss it more, because it's really not okay that somebody becomes permanently disabled trying to put food on the table for their family. So got through that quickly. Apologies again for everybody that was part of the last one, but I promise you the next webinar we'll be talking about that again. Okay, so what we're going to cover today when we go through the rescue side of things, in the first half of it, we're going to talk about actual incidents, just to paint the picture, make sure that we understand, does it always look the same? Are we constantly facing the same challenges? So before we get into the rescue, we take one step back and we just talk about fall protection. We know fall accidents don't happen often. They don't happen frequently, but when they do, they are devastating. The result is really, it's either permanent disabilities or fatalities. So they're really serious results. Now, rescues are even more infrequent, because you won't rescue 100% of the people that have fallen. Some of them might be able to help themselves. Some of them might not have worn the right equipment. But that being said, we still need to be really prepared to be able to action that rescue. So I think the overarching topic is, once again, falls don't happen often, but when they do, we need to be prepared and we need to be able to handle them in a proper manner to protect somebody's life. So how are we going to work through today's session? When we talk about what really happens, we're going to speak about why a fall becomes an emergency. So there's three basic concepts we just need to understand before we get into the actual topic. We'll then go into the falls happening before the rescue. So we'll just take a look at 5 videos. The purpose for it is just to set the tone, to make sure that we understand, is it always the same thing, or how does it look in each incident? We'll then get into how that affects, so what happens to the first responders or the rescue teams or the proto teams, whatever they're called on your site. We'll then quickly take a look at what happens during the rescue itself. And then lastly, in the first session, we'll talk about what happens after the rescue. So once all is said and done, what's the repercussions that are left behind? I really hope this adds value. So when we start off, we are going to talk about the first concept being the forces that are generated within a fall. So to kick it off, I'm just going to share a quick little video, and I'll talk us through the video just to explain what's happening. But ultimately what they did was they took a dummy that weighed 100 kilograms. They dropped that dummy, and they dropped them using different equipment. So the first thing they used was a body belt. Now, a body belt is definitely not safe, and you would have noticed the jerking action of that dummy, which is the big problem. The second one is just a normal rope lanyard connected to the back D-ring. Once again, no shock absorber, and we see the bounce. I need you to remember that bounce, because that's what actually ends up causing a lot of the damage. The third one is we use a front descender on our front D-ring, and this causes quite a lot of problems. If your teams are using ropes on a roof or on a fall arrest position, you need to take note that this could happen, because rope is not a fall arrest device, not being connected at the end of it at least. A seated harness, this luckily has been discontinued. I mean, the people that do rock climbing, they'll use these, but they use completely different ropes, so it's fine. In industrial setting, this is definitely not an okay option. And then what we'll notice is when we apply a shock absorbing lanyard, how does the forces affect that dummy? And what you'll notice first is there's no jerk. So there isn't a sudden jerk upwards where the body is savagely pulled in an upward direction, which actually causes damage. The second thing we look at is the retractable. And same story. There's no jerk on the body because there isn't enough full distance to create a force that could seriously injure the dummy or a person in real life. So what we do is we try to take those concepts and take them to site, and we try and explain them a bit better on site so that we believe that the more knowledge you have, the better decision you'll make. So we
Hi,
hope that
Dylan.
Hi.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have got attendees in the chat saying that your presentation is not visible, but I can still see it. Just
Should
give
I
us a
stop
sec.
sharing and reshare?
If you can, yeah, I think it just refresh. Some people can see.
Yes, right.
I think if you can, Dylan, just for, just so that we make sure we tick all of the boxes, just reshare if you don't mind. Okay,
No
most
problem.
people can see. Okay.
No,
I can see clearly now the presentation is gone.
yeah. And I'm trying to now navigate.
Sorry, Dylan, I made you stop for no reason now.
Oh, no,
We'll
sorry.
just get you. Sorry, everyone. Thanks. Yeah, some of the attendees did say that they should just refresh their page. And yeah, it's true. If you do download the Zoom app, it's a bit of a better experience. Thank you, Dylan. Apologies. Please
No
continue.
problem. Gareth, it's sharing now. You good?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so what we try to do is get onto site and educate people and make sure that they understand. So a common question we ask is, how much force can a human body take? Now, when we talk about force, we have to talk about kilonewtons because kilonewtons is a moving weight. But ultimately, it would be 6 kilonewtons, which is the equivalent of 600 kilograms of force on the human body. That is where the body starts deteriorating and becoming, well, getting into a state that could be fatal. So what we need to be doing is reducing any forces or any forces to make sure that they stay below that 600 kilograms of force or 6 kilonewtons. Now, if we ask the question, how much force can the 100 kg generate in falling just 1 meter, considering lanyards are generally 1.5 to 2 meters? The answer is we don't know. So we need to first understand what is the device that is being used to arrest the fall. What is it stopping with? Because like we saw in that previous video, where the dummy bounces, that means there is an extreme amount of force being pulled down and then being pushed up again, which is really not good for the human. What we want to do is we want to eliminate that bounce, and that's where we keep somebody safe. So by getting on site, we take our little bucky, and the S-Wagon then gets on site, and we go and drop 100 kilogram weight, just 1 meter. So this is a 2 meter lanyard, but we only let it free fall for 1 meter. And what that does is that generates about 1,200 kilograms of force, so 12 kilonewtons. And quite quickly, we can understand that 100 kilograms being dropped only a meter generates some serious force. You also notice when you experience the demo that this whole frame actually shakes quite badly, and it shows how vicious a fall actually occurs if there's no shock absorbing mechanism. The second thing we do is we drop 100 kilograms on a shock absorbing lanyard. Still 1 meter, so exactly the same distance. In this instance, though, it generally hovers between 400 and 600 kilograms of force because the certified equipment needs to remove forces and not allow them to exceed 600 kilograms or 6 kilonewtons. So this can start showing you that dropping 1 meter will have different results depending on the systems we use. You'll also notice that the weight is far closer to the ground than when we are dropping it with just a piece of rope. And then the third thing we do is we do it on a retractable, same story, drop it from the same height. In this instance, it locks up far quicker. But ultimately, what it's doing is removing the forces from the falls. So this is the first principle that I need us to understand before we carry on, or the first concept before we carry on. The second one is suspension trauma. And I think everybody's heard about suspension trauma and probably knows a little bit, but I think it's still important that we understand the concept and we speak to it a little bit. So suspension trauma is ultimately when I'm in an upright position, generally after a fall, and my body is hanging in a vertical direction. The blood is starting to drain and pull into my legs. The webbing around my thighs is cutting off circulation. But not only that, because I'm in a horizontal, in a vertical position, with the blood pulling down into my legs and just pulling in my legs, ultimately I'm losing blood from vital organs like my brain, my heart, and that's where people start fainting and start having seizures if they do. But the big problem is because you're in that upright position, you're not using your muscles, which would actually also pump that blood and make sure it circulates. So I've always understood the concept from a point of, if you're in a parade and you stand in the same position, if we watch this gentleman over here, just to be clear, I don't know anything about Queen Elizabeth, but this guy interests me. Now, what happened to him is he just slowly started tipping forward and falling over. Now, this is the exact same thing as suspension trauma, where he's been in a position, he's been static for a long time, he hasn't moved his muscles, and slowly the brain has, the blood has pulled up in his legs, and it's sat in his legs. The human body is phenomenal though, because what does it do? It says, listen, I need blood, I need oxygen. So the person faints and goes horizontal. And when they go horizontal, immediately that blood flows straight through the body again. Now, our problem is in a fall arrest situation, we don't get that option, because when you're hanging from your harness, ultimately there's no way to get horizontal. You're hanging in a vertical position, and if you're conscious, you can maybe prevent it, and we'll quickly touch on that. If you're not conscious, it's obviously quite impossible to get into a horizontal position. So if we are lucky to be in a conscious space, we can use what we call a stand-in step, where we deploy either one or two pieces of webbing, and ultimately what they do is they allow us to stand in them, which does two things. It releases the webbing around the thighs, so that will promote and allow for blood to flow easier back up. Even though it's difficult, well, it'll still be difficult for the blood to flow, but it's got more of a chance. The second thing it does is, by stepping into these stand-in steps, you're actually using your muscles, your leg muscles, your biggest muscle in your body. And what that does is that starts pumping that blood and oxygen-filled blood back into the system, and making sure it doesn't go toxic by just pulling up in your legs. So this is the second concept we need to understand. And the third one we did touch on slightly in the previous session, but once again, it does apply to this. And that is the pendulum swing. So what you'll note is the anchor point is to the side of the person that falls. This video is quite old, so the shaking is supposed to happen in the video. You probably won't do that if you do fall. But what you'll notice is the swing is quite significant, and two things happened. One, he was standing on this level, and now his head is below there. And two, the swing was quite drastic. And in that swing, you create quite a bit of force as well. So you can imagine if there were a wall to stop you, that impact is going to cause quite a lot of problem. So these three concepts, I think we need to understand before we start trying to open up the subject of rescue. Now, considering these three, I'm going to share 5 videos quickly, which will also be part of that consideration. I must just make it clear, I'm not sharing this because I want to share something gruesome or people getting injured. Ultimately, if we can see how somebody else has become injured or what the situation was, we can probably prevent it for others in the future. So we need to learn from it. I will also say that the videos are really bad quality. So apologies about that, but I think we still get the concepts as they happen. And I'm quite sure a lot of you have seen these videos. So the first thing we spoke about was the ABCs. If we don't have our ABCs, anchor, body, harness, and connector, then we don't have a rescue. And I think it's quite vital that we understand that from this video, that if we are not connected properly, a rescue looks very different. Now, concept 1, we spoke about the forces that happen within a fall. This person fell more than 2 meters. We can be 90% certain that there is serious physical damage, both external and internal, on that person. What you will find is generally there's a shock, and that shock kind of acts as I can still go, but you'll quite soon find out whether or not your body's in an okay state. The second thing that we need to understand is there was a person who was a bystander who immediately ran towards that person. And I think it's quite an important observation we need to make over the next 4 videos as well, because this seems to be a common occurrence when it comes to accidents and incidents. And then the third point is that when we consider a rescue in this state, there isn't a rescue that we need to get the person to the ground, obviously, but there is an immediate need to get medical attention and assistance because this person would have suffered some serious damage from that particular fall. The second one we have is where somebody was working on a ceiling and they come crashing down. Thank goodness for him, he was wearing a harness. But what you'll notice is right at the end of the video, he actually starts trying to lift himself. Again, we get into this the state of shock. And I mean, the immediate thing you want to do is get out. And that is a real concept that we need to understand. So from the initial concepts we spoke about, that fall would have created, again, some serious damage and some serious, whether it's external, definitely internal damage on that person. The second one we spoke about is even though he is trying to climb up this rope, which when we get to the rescue component, we'll speak to why that's also really bad. But he won't manage to get very far. And when he's hanging in his harness, he will start succumbing to suspension trauma as well. So concept 2 takes place. In this instance, concept 3 isn't a thing. He fell straight down. Lucky for him, because he could have swung and hit into something quite painful. Again, we talk about the bystander. Immediate response was run towards, even though he nearly got hit by whatever debris was falling. So we need to understand that that's a reality. In terms of rescues, this is actually, luckily he didn't hit the ground. And also luckily he's quite close to the ground. So this actually starts becoming a really simple rescue, but we shouldn't be betting on that because that's a lot of risk and he's very lucky to have not hit the ground. But we'll cover what that rescue looks like when we get into the rescue session. The third one is a bit slower. There's a couple of things we need to observe as this happens. Usually we see rescues as an immediate thing. We can see this MUP start losing balance and falling over. Now again, we can clearly see people start moving towards the area that there's going to be a problem. The other thing is, if you notice over here, there's a big old hole and there's one just under here. And when this person starts running, I mean, they're putting themselves at risk trying to get there while this is obviously tilting over and 2 people are ejected from the basket of that MUP that has now obviously fallen over. So when we think about our concepts again, the forces, there's a serious force, because this isn't an instance that we just fall. This is being shot out of the system, and it seems like they were probably connected with shock absorbing lanyards, but that force will be significantly more than just falling. The other problem is that they will strike into one another, but we'll get into that now. Concept 2, we speak about the suspension trauma. So suspension trauma, once they're in this position and they're hanging, I mean, after they stop swinging, there's really nowhere for them to go. And they will ultimately be hanging in their harnesses with no option except to have suspension trauma, unless they have standing steps. Obviously, if they're not unconscious and they have standing steps, phenomenal. Now, the third concept we spoke about was the pendulum swing. And the pendulum swing, like we see in this video, doesn't mean that the anchor point is just above and to the side. But even if it's lower than us and to the side, that pendulum makes you swing. And in this case, the bigger damage was probably them crashing into one another or crashing into the crane itself. And that is a serious consideration, because if somebody gets physically damaged like that, there's serious injuries that can occur, and your rescue starts becoming something a lot trickier, because rescuing somebody in that condition is quite frightening. So we can understand that the casualties after this instance are probably not in a good condition as it is. We've seen the bystanders again running towards the scene. I mean, if they get too close, they could get hit by a piece of steel. We don't know if this piece of steel stopped moving. But more than that, we need to now start thinking is, how do we rescue these people? Because the device is capsized, it's fallen over. How are we going to safely get them back to the ground? Because we need to get above them to create an anchor point. So we'll need to take that concept with us as we go through. The next is a bit more of a general workspace where these guys actually worked really safely as far as they could. They just didn't acknowledge that there's going to be movement of whatever job they were doing, and the area was going to change. Now, this is probably best case because their fall was minimal. So concept 1, where we talk about the distance and the forces we create, they almost immediately stop falling. However, that piece of steel has crashed into their structure and into them potentially. So that might cause some injury, physical injury to these people. When we talk about concept 2, whether they will be, they will receive or get under suspension trauma, probably not, because they have something that they are standing against, and they're quite horizontal. So it might not be as much of a risk, but there is a risk that they try to stand up and then fall again. I'm sorry. And then the pendulum. So the pendulum was phenomenal from their fall protection because they were connected directly above themselves, which means there was no swing. They didn't have a risk of swinging into this wall or swinging into a piece of steel, which really helped the situation. But once again, we just saw this guy's helmet fall, and we've got people that are coming near the area. Nobody's certain about what's happening here, and it's again, this is the 4th time that people move towards the accident, which is obviously quite a risk. When it comes to rescues, this will be a tricky rescue because the means of access is what got struck by the piece of structural steel. And by not knowing what condition that's in, that's a really tough kind of assessment to do on site. But 2 is, where do we anchor? And they seem to have set something up, so hopefully they've planned for if they needed to be rescued. But if they haven't, to get an anchor point above them, that will be quite tricky. And then the last one that we've got is seemingly quite a standard operation. Obviously, there's an exposed edge, which is never good. These people seem to be moving scaffold around in the area. If you can take a note of how much how many items or how many objects are below them. And what you'll note is when this person loses their balance, they could quite easily strike one of these items. We're not sure if they did or didn't. So the fall itself is going to be substantial. If we think about concept one, they've fallen on a lanyard. They've probably created up to, well, just below 600 kilograms of force. So there's going to be serious injury already. Whether or not they crashed into something would just amplify that and make it worse. The second concept is we talk about suspension trauma. We need to understand that this person's probably unconscious because the way that that swing worked is falling over the edge and back in. If there's anything solid on this side, there's a high likelihood that that person struck it and could have knocked themselves unconscious. And then point three is the pendulum effect. And again, it's important that even if it's not above you, but if there's an obstruction that stops the lanyard from moving in a natural position to weigh under the anchor point, you will get a pendulum effect. And that could quite literally smash you into the wall in this case. We assume, we can't see it, obviously. In this instance, the bystanders were really good. I mean, they didn't really run towards it. They took a look, and I hope they went and got help. In terms of a rescue, this is really challenging because this person is now likely unconscious, likely difficult to reach and have a secure anchor point to set to. So it would pose quite a difficult rescue for the rescue team. So we're going to use those 5 videos and the 3 concepts just to build out a bit more on what happens during a rescue. So if we think about our proto teams, our first responders, our rescue teams, there's a lot that happens in those situations, and it happens really quick. Even the crane that's falling slowly, it's a fast activity that happens. Now, for the rescuers, whether they are rescuing somebody that's conscious or unconscious, there is a physical stress that they will be put under during that period, the immediate period of carrying out the rescue. That physical stress would be maybe they need to get equipment, they need to grab their equipment, they need to get to the work area, or they need to get to a height to perform the rescue, probably 90% of the time. So there'll be a physical exertion to get up there. There might be, if the casualty is unconscious, physical exertion, actually maneuvering them safely, making sure that they don't get further damaged or hurt while they're performing a rescue. There would also be an emotional stress that's quite heavy on these teams. And that emotional stress, I mean, if we back it up, and like I made the comment right in the beginning saying, falls don't happen often. So then we need to consider how ready is this rescue team to actually perform the rescue. The less ready they are, the more anxious they're going to be, the more scared they're going to be that do they actually know what to do? And from an anxiety point of view, just the uncertainty or the unpreparedness of having to do a rescue, that's quite huge on a person. The next one is, did they get the right communication? Because somebody might have radioed in, but have they shared the whole story? And they will be under a lot of stress in terms of, do I have the right information? Do I have everything I need to make a good decision to go and rescue this person? And then there's obviously the final emotional stress, which is they are very clear that this person that has been involved in a fall might be in a very bad position and might have a very limited time to actually be rescued properly. And I think it's quite critical that we start, or we at least we're cognizant about this effect on the people performing the rescues. The third point that they would have to do while they're actually responding is they need to assess the sites. They need to make sure that, is the site stable in terms of, can I get to a safe point to perform a rescue? If the person's unconscious, there's no means of communicating with them and finding out, why did you fall? Was there something that I can't see that might have caused the fall? Was there a slippery surface that nobody was too aware of? So assessing the scene is really critical, because when the rescuer goes up, they need to make sure that they're safe in order to safely secure and protect the person, the casualty. The next thing that will be taken into account is their concentration. I mean, from the first moment, they need to be engaged. They need to contact medical paramedics. They need to get somebody medical on site, so that by the time the person is on the ground, they can be treated and given the best chance to actually survive or have the least amount of injuries. They need to make sure that they are concentrating in all of their movements, getting up to that point that we said they've just assessed, making sure they get to the surface or the roof level to perform the rescue. Concentration on, is the anchor point actually appropriate for doing this rescue? Concentration from a point of selecting or having the right gear with them and using it properly, because in this instance, minutes can be the difference of life and death. Then there's an obvious social pressure, which, I mean, that's just the expectation that you've been appointed the rescue person. Everybody on site, everybody involved in this expects you to carry out the rescue and be the person that keeps this person from being harmed. And that will definitely play a toll on the rescuer. So ultimately, we often get to sites and the answer is we need to rescue someone fast. And I think it's quite important that we make the distinction between fast and efficient, because ultimately, if we do a fast rescue that creates a second casualty, it won't be considered a successful rescue. Now you've got two people that are in some serious danger. If we look at the scene itself, what happens on the scene itself? If we start speaking about the casualties themselves, they're going through a lot of fear as well, and quite often disorientation. So this gentleman that tried to climb up his rope, he wasn't doing it for any other reason than probably the only thing that made sense to him at that second, because he was in pain and quite scared about what happens next. That would then also affect the person trying to carry out a rescue, because the person that is the casualty could interfere with the rescue and not help them, not because they're trying to be difficult, just because they're not really with it in that moment. They could also move around, and like this gentleman tries to climb, moving around to try find something to grab on or get away from could make the rescue itself also quite difficult. They might not follow instructions. I mean, if you're nervous and somebody's telling you to calm down, probably not going to just calm down. So these are the factors that we need to consider on the person we're trying to rescue. The other side is, are they deteriorating? Meaning, is there physical, external, or internal injuries that is maybe making this person go from consciousness to unconsciousness? And I mean, that itself would be terrifying to experience, especially if you're trying to rescue somebody and you can see that happening in front of you. Now, from a bystander and a colleague's point of view, I mean, we can see they're trying to help. People want to help. The first action is move towards the accident. And that in itself is quite a danger for the bystanders. I mean, if something else happens as a secondary action and it falls on somebody, that's going to be a catastrophe in itself. The other thing is it can cause confusion, because people go there to try and help, but too many people shouting instructions or giving an opinion, especially if they don't understand the dynamics at play, could end up making a really disastrous rescue. Then when we talk about the rescuer, we need to start talking about what are they going through, because this is the vital point. Like we said, I mean, trying to perform a rescue in this kind of situation I feel sorry for anybody that needs to do that in a safe and efficient manner. So the first thing that they're doing is casual management. They need to be engaging with the casualty. They need to be making sure that that person is keeping as calm and collected as possible with everything we've just explained, which is probably not really easy to do. If they're conscious, we need to get them in their standing steps. If they're conscious, we need to figure out how bad is the damage, how much have they hurt themselves. If they're unconscious, then the rescue is just petrified because you got no feedback, and that in itself is really nerve-wracking. They also need to manage the bystanders, make sure that nobody is adding difficulty to something that is already difficult, and get them out of the way in case we get another injury. The situation itself, they need to be managing whether it's going to get worse. I mean, this could be weather, this could be traffic underfoot, this could be machines and equipment. It's not just this situation, but every single situation needs to be understood, and the rescue team needs to assess that really critically to make sure that they make good decisions in that moment. And then obviously their own equipment. So performing rescues, you need to, 1, understand your equipment, and 2, trust it, and 3, have the right equipment. And that equipment management under all of these stresses, it might seem quite small and insignificant, but it starts building up and it starts becoming something that can cause a bigger problem as the rescue progresses. And then the medical management, like I mentioned earlier, how do we stabilize and keep the person in a safe condition until there is medical experts that actually are going to take over and assist from there. Quick last point on number 1 is what happens afterwards. And what happens after the rescue is there's a physical recovery. So we've had instances where we know of people that have fallen just 1 meter, being booked off work for 7 months. There's a physical recovery that needs to occur for the casualty. There's an emotional recovery because that person's going to have some sort of traumas. And I mean, if their job is no longer their job because of this, and they can't function their job, there's going to be a point of how much am I worth that could affect that person. There'll be a financial cost, not necessarily medical, that'll probably be covered, but there is a bigger financial cost. Do they lose their income? Do they have to pay bills that aren't directly related to it, but are caused because of the fall? And then obviously they'll need to assist with the investigation. And I mean, that in itself will just give you a lot of PTSD, having to relive that situation. Colleagues and bystanders also, they'll have an emotional effect where they've experienced something that's traumatic. A physical, potentially, if we run in and try and be a hero and something falls on us, we can be damaged for a long time. And then the rescuers themselves, I think they're the ones that end up with the most emotional effect, especially if it's something they do on a regular basis. Physical, not so much if they do their job properly, but can be affected during a rescue. And then the company itself, obviously there's a financial cost linked to this. That could be from damaged property to legal battles, as well as reputational costs that obviously would impact the financial cost as well at the end of the day. Ultimately, in closing the first session, I think it's important we understand that even a successful rescue will have long-lasting effects on multiple people and obviously the company as well. So we've covered session 1. Gareth, I don't know if there is, do we need to take a 10-minute break or do we want to get straight into the next session?
That's entirely up to you, Dylan. If you have the energy to carry on, I think it's a good idea, if that's okay. I don't, attendees, some attendees might not come back. So if you have the energy, we can soldier on.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll jump straight into the session 2, which is now speaking to the rescue itself. What we're going to cover in this is we're going to show 3 practical demos. We're then going to speak about the rescue plan. We'll speak about training, the equipment for the rescue plan, and the inspection and preparation of that equipment. And once we've gone through all of these topics, as mentioned earlier, I don't think within the time frame we've got, we can't cover every single aspect because everybody would have different challenges, but I think it gives us a good template to work from. So the first one we're going to jump into, I'm just going to have to do a bit of tricks here because I've got these videos not in the presentation. Okay, listen. Gareth, can you just confirm you guys can see this?
Yes, we can. You can put it in as big a full screen mode as you can.
Done.
There we go. Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll walk us through this, but essentially what this is this is an assisted rescue where the casualty has fallen on a system, but the system might have a rescue incorporated in it already. And what happens is when this device at the top is actually pulled, it releases the person down to the ground and eliminates a lot of the risk that generally comes with the rescue. So that is what we call an assisted rescue. We'll get into the different types, but I just want to play these quickly before we jump into the next stage. So in this instance, we've got our casualty that's getting into his stand-in steps, but we are acting as if he's unconscious. Obviously, we can't put our people in danger, so we make sure that Promise gets into his stand-in steps, but he's not allowed helping the rescuer. And that makes it quite tricky from a point of how does the rescuer get from this height down to him safely and still get this person off their system. Now, even though this is a rescue, you wouldn't have two systems, but because this is a rescue training exercise, we need to make sure he's got a backup, but in real life, you probably wouldn't. Now, what the rescuer does is they need to measure how long of a piece of rope they would need to actually get to the casualty. Because normally if the person was conscious, they would be able to drop that piece of rope down. The casualty would be able to connect it to their chest. And it ultimately makes it a much easier rescue. Now, there are devices and there's obviously ways that we can get around it, but there's limitations. And you can probably only reach somebody about 4 meters away. And even here, which is probably less than 3 meters, it's quite tricky to get that little hook through that little D-ring and make sure that it's being connected properly. And this is things that, this is a calm situation. In a real rescue, this becomes a lot more intense and a lot more scary because the results are a lot more real, obviously. So once he's managed to connect him, he removes his pole. Obviously, he needs to be safe himself. So you'll see Funzo's managing his equipment really well, making sure it's being kept aside. And what he'll do then is he will pull out as much slack as he can. But there's only so much slack you can pull out with your arms, because lifting 100 kilograms from below you is an extremely difficult feat. And lifting it off of just a descender is near impossible. So what would happen is we would pull out as much slack as we can. And then there's another system that needs to be attached, which ends up obviously becoming complicated. And that's why I was saying earlier that the equipment component of the rescue is so vital, but it's generally quite complicated to carry out a rescue, because lifting somebody, even if it's just 50 centimeters high, is a very difficult exercise. So what Funz has done is he's connected a pulley to the rope that's coming out the back of the descender, and a secondary pulley lower, which is on the rope which is connected to the casualty. And then he starts pulling, and he needs to, ultimately what he's trying to do is, this block here is currently carrying Promise's weight. What he is trying to get to is, can he remove Promise from this line and transfer him over? Every now and then you'll see him have to lean over and make this a bit longer, because the closer it gets, the less it actually pulls. So it is quite a tedious exercise, but we need to get that person up and off of their system to make sure that we rescue them. So you can see he's now transferring properly onto the rescue device. He's tried it, there's still a bit of tension, but this is how we lift someone. Might have to readjust it one more time. So he pulls the pulley down and off he goes, lifting. Now you can see that this line has taken up most of the weight of the casualty. And if he tests this, it's probably loose at the moment, because he's lifted him sufficiently to allow the rescue. There is a need, though, that you need to remove all of your devices, because if your devices are still connected and you try and lower someone, that in itself will cause a secondary problem where you have to re-rescue them. And that just adds, obviously, it doubles the time of the rescue, basically. So making sure that the equipment is easy to use and simple, especially, again, if we haven't used it frequently, is quite a critical step for us. So Funs is removing the handle. He'll then remove the pulley systems. And all along now, Promise is being held by the rescue device or the rescue system. And now, because he's unconscious, Funzo needs to be extra careful and actually lower this person carefully, because we also don't want to create any further damage or issues if they have already injured themselves. Now, this is what we would call a simple pick-off rescue. We're literally picking them off their own system and transferring them to a rescue system. But like you can see, it can be quite a complicated system. And the problem is, this is the norm that we go to. We've got one more rescue. And this particular rescue we're talking about, or we're displaying, we spoke about the loads shifting. So, and the preparation. So what I did was, before I sent that equipment up, I tangled the rope a bit to see how our team would actually manage with it. And this is people that are comfortable with working at heights and very competent in using this stuff on a daily basis. I won't make us watch the whole thing, because it's just Funzo basically trying to untangle the rope. But that in itself added 3 minutes to the rescue, which in this kind of situation, one, causes extra stress, and two, would obviously potentially cause fatal if it was a time-sensitive rescue. Now, once again, Promise is acting as if he is unconscious. He's in his standing steps. He's got his back up. We need to make sure he's safe during these exercises. But what Funzo is going to do is, he will have to shift down. And this is a bit more complicated, but it's important for us to understand how being 1.5 meters away adds so much difficulty to a rescue, even though the system is a lot easier to use. So Funz is preparing himself and making sure he can lower himself, again, training exercise, so he's got a backup. In a real situation, you probably don't have the luxury of that, and you need to get down and save that person and make sure you get to them as quickly as possible. Now, we set the rescue up here intentionally just to show how difficult it can be to move someone slightly to the side. So Funs will then transfer onto the rescue device. Obviously here we need to double and triple check, because the moment you shift your weight onto there, you need to be sure that that device is working as it must. And what he will do then is he will begin to lower to the same point as the person or the casualty, which if it's further than 6 meters away, this is probably one of the ways that you can get there. But ultimately, he'll lower himself safely to get in, basically in line with the casualty, to be able to reach them. Once he gets there, he locks this device off. So you can see just by holding the wheel, he can actually stop himself from moving. Really smart piece of equipment. But he's completely locked himself off. And now he's going to attempt to get to the casualty. Again, we're only talking about 1.5 meters. This is quite drastic, considering sometimes it's a few meters away and we think we're going to just rescue someone. Now, what he needs to do is create a positive connection. So he needs to make sure that he has a connection between himself and the casualty, because again, our objective is to remove the casualty from this line. Now, when we started this video, this line was directly dropping straight down. As Funzo starts working with him and shifting him onto his own system, you'll see both lines are almost pointing towards each other. But ultimately what we want is the rescue line should be dropping straight, because that means both people are on the rescue line. And this one on the right-hand side, the yellow block, should be at a far steeper angle towards the rescue person. Now what he needs to do is maneuver at least, up to 280 kgs, because each equipment can take 140. He needs to maneuver probably around, call it 160 to 200 kgs right now, and get that up enough for this to release. And the reason I'm showing it from this angle is getting up and this releasing takes a hell of a lot longer. You need to go far higher to actually get the person off their system. And the problem is that if we do not get them off their system, we don't do a rescue. We can't get them down. So we need to be very clear on how are we getting them up? How are we making sure that this person that is currently being in danger because of the equipment that initially saved them, that is now putting them in danger, how do we get them out of that and get them to the ground, get them to a point that somebody can perform a rescue for them? So in total, I think Funs must have done about 40 or 50 turns to lift this because of the angle. Normally it would be 15 maybe, because straight up and down is really simple. And I'm making a very big point on that because I think all the rescue systems that I see, or all the rescue plans that I've seen on sites, what they're talking about is straight up and down rescue. They're not considering even the smallest deviation. So we can now see this line is probably slack enough for Funs to confirm. And if it is slack, the moment he sees that promise is 100% on his system and it's slack, he can then carry on with his rescue and lower both of them safely to the ground, making sure that any of the medical parties that are there to come and help are able to do so. Now, when we spoke about suspension trauma, I just want to stop the video here for a second. If somebody's been in this position for 15, 20 minutes, there's a high likelihood, if they weren't in standing steps, that the blood in their legs, like I said, it pools in the legs, that it has become a bit toxic because it's lacked oxygen and it hasn't been exposed to the oxygen it needs to make sure that it's still healthy. Now, one of the big problems, and until the emergency services get there, it's critical for us to manage this person in a proper manner. If we just stand him up and take his harness off, he will be extremely vulnerable from a point of, if there is toxic blood, it's going straight to his heart and he might end up dying from that. So it's our job then to stabilize the person, keep them in a position, and slowly reintroduce that blood to make sure that there's no further damage once the rescue has been successfully achieved. So that's our practical demo. Now, when we start talking about a rescue plan, it's part of a fall protection plan, and we can talk for a long time about fall protections are extremely valuable, but they need to be used properly. And one of the ways of using them properly is having a good rescue plan incorporated. Having a 3,000-page fall protection plan doesn't make it better. The simpler it is, the more likely somebody is going to use it. So when we start talking about a rescue plan, we need to be talking about, where do we keep that rescue plan? Like I've just mentioned, it should be part of your fall protection plan, and it should be something that is looked at. It shouldn't be gathering dust on a shelf. It should be something that before the specific task, if there's a change of task or a change of job being done, the fall protection plan is looked at and confirmed that this will work in this area. Because like we saw, just a slight deviation of 1.5 meters can create a much more complex rescue. A lot of rescue systems can't even do a rescue where it shifts somebody horizontally. So it's important that we understand that, and the rescue plan is actually utilized, not just written so that I can get on site and then stacked away. Now, when we talk about the types of rescues we should be considering, there's a self-rescue, and I know there's a lot of people that sell self-rescue equipment. I don't believe that's the right thing, because it's not self-rescue. What they're selling is a kit that can do a pick-off rescue. Self-rescue is you can rescue yourself. And most of the time you can't, because you don't have that kit with you. And if you're unconscious, there's zero chance. So self-rescue in this instance, it should be considered if you're climbing up a cat ladder and you have a retractable lifeline connected to you, or even a lanyard, and you fall and it stops you from hitting the ground, and you do not suffer serious damage to the point that you can actually get yourself safely off that ladder while still being connected, that would be considered a self-rescue. So being able to take a step up, release the retractable from its tense, from being tense or tensioned, then walk back down slowly, obviously get back down to the ground, that would be considered a self-rescue. Now, we must think about these as the hierarchy of rescues almost, because we want that, right? We would rather somebody, well, we would rather nobody needs a rescue, but the very first one is, can they get themselves to safety? Because that eliminates other people putting their life at risk as well. The second one is an assisted self-rescue. And that is like this instance where this bystander can quite easily grab this ladder, shift it under the person, and hopefully that person is able to get themselves up and off their system and then climb down to the ground and await further medical treatment. But like we showed, if that person is unconscious, if that person is stressing out and fighting or not willing to cooperate, it can also make it quite tricky. But if we can do that, ideal. The next one is a MUPE recovery, and this is quite contentious. I don't particularly like it, but it can work, and we just need to be aware of where and how we use it. So I think this is the last video of the day. This person has fallen through a skylight. They're hanging almost in the middle of nowhere. Now, the one thing is, how long did it take the MUPE to get you? Because I don't think the MUPE was just waiting. So how long has this person been hanging? Because they're not in standing steps. It also, to me, it seems kind of like they might be dropping in and out of consciousness, which is understandable because this is a serious fall that they've gone through. Also, safety doesn't seem too hectic. This guy's wearing shorts and specs. But ultimately, what we observe here is if the person is disoriented or uncertain, I mean, the concept is good, but are we actually putting them in bigger danger? There's a crushing risk here. We've got this person barely hanging on. If we lift them too far and they experience a second fall on that system, it's going to break. It's not designed for two falls. Same as the guy trying to lift himself. The other thing is we're trying to now maneuver this person into the basket. He's maneuvering over the panel which is used to operate the machine. Are we putting everybody at risk again? And the point is that when we are considering rescues, this isn't that we can't use this rescue. We just need to make certain that if we are going to do it, both the person being rescued and the person doing the rescue can actually be safe and be kept out of harm from creating any further problems. So a MUP, definitely a consideration if it can work in the space. If you're working on an uneven surface, probably not a good idea. So let's not force it round peg into a square. So the next one is when we start talking about pick-off rescues. So that was the two videos I showed you. The one with the system that had to be created. And then the secondary one where the person dropped to connect to the person, to the casualty. Pick-off rescues are the most common. And literally what you're doing is taking that person off their system, but you then need to consider, where am I taking them? You saw how difficult it is to lift somebody even 30 centimeters. Getting them up to the roof, we can't just say it's going to happen. We need to make sure that the right equipment is being used to actually do that. A lot of rescue kits can't actually lift somebody that high. All they are designed for is lift them 30 centimeters, let the lanyard get detached from them, drop them to the ground. Other instances, I mean, if we're in a space where there is heavy traffic underfoot, we need to move that person and traverse them horizontally. We need to make sure that the right equipment is actually accessible to do that, to perform that kind of rescue. And then there's also the option of having high-angle rescue. And high-angle rescue is great, but it's a very technical rescue. And obviously, the more technical it is, the more risk there is, which means that these people need to be better prepared to actually carry out that kind of rescue. Further to that, in the rescue plan, things that we should be including is who is leading the rescue, who's responsible to actually carry out instruction, carry out the rescue, carry out making sure that the scene is safe. This is a critical part that needs to be extremely clear when we develop a rescue plan. We also need to know who is responsible for contacting the medical assistants, who's getting the paramedics to make sure that as we get this human down to the ground, there is people that can actually help him or her stay alive. So post-rescue, who's doing that interaction? Who's managing that? Because we quite often forget that. A simple one that I see far too often, if I go to site and I ask, where's your rescue kit? It's in the warehouse, or it's in the storeroom. Okay, cool. Somebody falls here now. We don't have it ready. It could be locked up. It could be missing. It could be not ready for use. So we need to make sure that we understand, where does the rescue kit get left for each job, so that it's clear. There's my rescue kit. I know if something happens, I can go and perform a rescue. Where is the casualty? Now, this one is quite tricky because, like we saw in a lot of those videos, the casualty might start in one place, but might end in another place. But if we've got a general idea, we're probably more likely to give the rescue technician a chance to actually perform the rescue. A difficult one, but my general go-to is we assume the person's unconscious because that's worst case scenario. Unconscious isn't just bumping your head. if somebody hasn't eaten in the morning, they might become unconscious. We can't not expect it, but there is things that you can put in place to make sure that there's less chance to bump a head or less chance to strike yourself in a manner that might cause you to become unconscious. Can they self-rescue? Ideal. If they can, phenomenal. We've hopefully eliminated a big risk that is for other people as well as the person that's the casualty. Can they be reached safely? And this is really important, because whether or not the system is designed for it, there's also been instances where the system is designed to do that, but it might just be 1 or 2 meters short. And if it's 1 or 2 meters short, you're stuck in the same position, and getting that person to ground is the most important thing. You need to make sure you can reach them, and you need to make sure the equipment can actually do that job. As I mentioned earlier, must they be raised, lowered, or moved sideways? Let's not just think lifting somebody is easy, or moving them sideways, actually. Both of those are extremely difficult exercises. And then what is supporting them? So what is their anchor point? That should be part of the fall protection plan, because we need to make sure that that anchorage device is sufficient to actually carry their weight while the weight is being transferred, like we've got on the next point, onto the transferred weight of the rescue kit. So after it's been in a fall, it shouldn't just break if it's a properly certified anchor, but we need to be aware of the anchorage points that we use. And then what are the hazards that remain active? So even while I'm doing my rescue, what are the risks at play? Is there live wires? Is there a forklift that's moving up and down? These are active hazards that we need to be reminded about. And then who is responsible? And it's probably that first person again, but who's responsible to stabilize this person and keep them in the best condition we can while we're waiting for the paramedics? I hope that what that section has touched on so far makes it clear that having reliance on a fire brigade or off-site rescue contractor, it really isn't a good idea, because this stuff happens quickly and there's a lot of elements, and speed is we need to be efficient, but adding on 5 minutes for driving or 10 minutes for driving, that could be the difference between life and death. Section 2, we talk quickly about training. So where we talk about training, I really hope that what's come through is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all training. We can't just say, I went on rescue training, I'm sorted, I'm done, I'm ready. That's not how it works. We've seen these different types of scenarios. Each of them would require a different level of skill. Each of them would require a different level of understanding equipment. We need to be clear that there's not a one-size-fits-all. Now, what we should be considering when we're selecting our rescue is it needs to meet a unit standard. Our unit standards have just been extended, so phenomenal. But if there is a unit standard, it needs to meet it. In this case, unit standard 22995 is the minimum. Over and above that, we need to make sure that the training is being done on the exact rescue kits that are going, kits actually, that are going to be used. Because if you train on one set of equipment and you expect it to work a second piece of equipment, even though it looks the same, there might be nuances that cause a disruption in the rescue process. We need to also our rescue training should be from different anchorage positions, being right above the person, being to the side, being below. I mean, we need to figure these things out, because that's what could happen on site. And it's quite important that that gets covered in the training. Training and rescue from a conscious and an unconscious perspective, we can't just assume it's best case scenario. We need to be prepared that this person has fallen unconscious. We can still rescue them without their help. So when we start thinking about, are our rescue teams really ready? This is something that horrifies me every time I speak about it on sites, because if I ask somebody if they rescue or if they're competent to rescue, the answer is, yeah, they did their unit standard training. Perfect. When did they do it? 2 years ago. It expires in 3 years because it's through the professional body. Phenomenal. That is not fair for the person expected to carry out the rescue. At the end of the day, if you have not touched that equipment or interacted with it regularly, you're going to forget how to use it effectively, and you are more likely to put somebody else at serious risk, but you, as the rescue person, are going to live with that consequence. And we need to make sure that these people, if they're expected to do rescues, they are trained appropriately and they're given the correct support to do so. We do training in these, like I showed you in our videos right now, in a really good setting, in a setting that is safe, a setting that has backup devices. We don't do the training in this setting that the fall might happen. And it's quite important that once somebody's competent, there's actual drills that happen on site and interact with the site challenges, not just the perfect training facility situation. Then we need to consider, is the rescue kit easy to deploy and efficient to deploy an efficient rescue? Again, if the team aren't familiar with it, you can have the best kit in the world. It's not going to help you. So this was quite an interesting exercise. I just quickly, we're finishing off now. There's a couple minutes left, but I quickly Googled rescue kits. And the main rescue kits, you can see, all look the same. And I'm very familiar with this. This is the one we rescued off in one of those videos. They all look the same, but they all work quite differently. And more to that, they're complicated. If you get one pulley or one rope grab upside down, your whole rescue could be messed up and you have to reset. Now, if a team are constantly using this, phenomenal, do it. But if it is something that gets interacted with when there's only a rescue needed, which means maybe once in 5 years, we need to not be surprised if it doesn't work how we expected it to work. So understanding your rescue kits, if you're responsible for the safety side of things, you need to make sure you've got the right rescue kit for your site and that it's simple and the people can actually use it. Not just let's buy a ratchet and hoil. You're going to put somebody in trouble. There is alternatives, but again, you need to, it's not to say that one size fits all. You can get different kinds of equipment, but you need to understand on your site, what are the rescues that will be carried out? And ultimately, which system would serve the purpose? And then how do I make sure that my rescue team, my proto team, are properly supported in being ready to actually perform that rescue? And then the biggest topic that we miss completely, the inspection and preparation. This isn't like the inspection of our harnesses that we inspect before we use it and we just put it on and we go. The inspection of our rescue kits is really, really critical because we don't use them. We will use them once, like I said, every 5 years maybe. So these pieces of equipment need to be thoroughly inspected. They need to be checked extremely closely once a year at least, depending on how we store it and how we keep it safe from being interfered with. But the inspection is extremely critical on these pieces of equipment because if you get to site and it's wrong, or you get to site and something's missing, or you get to site and something's not working, you're putting somebody's life at risk. So the inspection annually is only if it is stored safely. If it's left out in the sun and it's getting damaged, you can't just inspect it once a year. It's not going to work like that. If it's left in an area with chemicals, if it's left in an area with bugs that are damaging and they love eating rope, there's going to be a problem. The other thing is it can only be inspected once a year if it's been sealed. And I don't mean lock it with a cable tie. I mean seal like a breakable seal that I can see somebody's used this. And not because I want to get them in trouble, because I need to know that somebody's opened this. So is the kit exactly how I left it when I inspected it? And is it ready for the rescue that it's supposed to actually perform? And that sealed will go along with actually being packed. So like I showed you, we lost 3 minutes in a rescue just by doing 2 or 3 pieces of rope, messing it up a bit. If the kit is tangled, you're asking for trouble when it comes to the rescue, because a lot more problems could happen during the rescue because the person's under pressure, because they're nervous. So the stuff needs to be packed in a way that when I use it on site, the thing on the top is what I use first, not reach to the bottom and throw everything around. It's just complicating something that's already highly stressful. And then in terms of the preparation of the kit must be in a ready state. So like I said, if it's sealed and you know it's been inspected and it's ready, you just need to have it with you and keep it in a position where you are ready, or it is ready to be used once if something goes wrong. It's available in the work area. You should be able to see it. I'm going to challenge everybody that is safety on this webinar. If you see anybody working at Huts this week, ask them where the rescue kit is. And I can bet you now that it's nowhere to be found. 90% of the time, not always. And then the final thing is, does the team understand the kit and the actual rescue plan? Have we taken a moment to say, this is where we're working, this is how the rescue will look if something goes wrong, because this is our full protection plan, this is how we are working, this is what could go wrong. And if we start approaching our rescues with the same mindset of keeping it simple, like we can with our full protection plans, make it really simple for the user, we're probably more likely to keep people safe if we get that right. Cool. That's everything. Well, that starting topic. If anyone has any other points that that haven't been covered, please do feel free to reach out, because it is important that we get this right.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Very informative presentation. Thank you. We're just waiting for Niels to get back online, and we have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Gareth. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Right, Dylan, thank you very much for yet a comprehensive presentation, this time on the fall rescue. And I must say, I found it very interesting. And based on the questions that we received as well, I can see that there's lots of participation and obviously interest in this. We've got around 19 questions. We're going to go through them quickly, if you don't mind, Dylan. I think it's important. And some of them might have been answered during your presentation, so please feel free to say, yes, we covered that, or agree or no. And where you feel it needs a bit more elaboration, go for it. So let's see if we can get through all of them. Frederick says, besides using the suspension trauma leg strap, is there anywhere a full body harness design that took into consideration engineering out suspension trauma?
That's a really good question. So there's actually a myth in that, right? So there's a harness called a suspension harness, which is designed for rope access. But when you use a suspension harness, what it does is, instead of the webbing going upwards on your thighs, it goes horizontal. And that could be more comfortable in that kind of situation. However, when you experience a fall and you might be creating about 600 kilograms of force, you're probably not okay. I think it's safer to assume you can't engineer it out. You need standing stuff or a sling or something to push your legs on, even a wall, just something to create that muscle kind of engagement to move the blood. But yeah, I don't believe that they have.
Okay, thank you. Kabu asked, in incidents where untrained co-workers instantly attempt a rescue, What are the most common mistakes that result in additional casualties? And how can organizations effectively prevent the, in brackets, rescuer becomes victim scenario? I think you covered some of that where people storm towards the scene, but if you want to add anything.
Yeah, one of the things I didn't elaborate on, which actually touches that a bit, is we spoke about the bystanders, but we didn't speak too much about the colleagues, so the team. And quite a big risk is if the teammate isn't necessarily the rescue person, and you are with this person, you want to help them. Your immediate reaction is to try to pull them up. The problem is if you manage to grab them and pull them up even a meter and drop them again, we've lost all the shock absorbing ability in the system. So now we're talking about 1,200 kilograms of force on the system. There's a huge risk that the system might break. So we shouldn't be doing that.
Okay, thanks. We'll have to move on. I see the questions are growing. Gareth, we'll just have to monitor it, and at one stage, just look at the time and see when we're going to cut off. How often, this is from Tembe Lile, how often should a fall rescue drill be conducted on a site to ensure workers are adequately prepared for an emergency?
Yeah, I mean, as often as possible. I think 3 months is fair.
Okay.
What we do is 3 months really equip somebody to be comfortable with the equipment.
Right. Frederick again would...
On that, the 3 months, also not let people know. Do it spontaneously. Don't tell them we're going to do it.
Like a normal evacuation drill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would self-rescue equipment be better for high-angle rescue? This would reduce or eliminate having other rescuers put themselves at risk.
Yeah, if you've sustained an injury through a fall, you're not going to be able to maneuver yourself like you need to in a high-angle rescue.
Yeah.
So you can't bet on that.
Okay. Kabu again, after successful recovery of a suspended worker, what medical complications can still occur, and what post-rescue procedures should be followed to ensure the person's condition does not deteriorate?
Yeah, so touched on that a bit. So when you get the person to the ground or to a surface, they need to lie down. They need to make sure that their legs are kept at an angle. And we don't want to loosen the webbing, because if that blood has become toxic in their legs, the moment you release the webbing, that blood starts circulating, versus let it in slowly kind of concept.
All right, thank you. Tembe Lila again. If you could recommend one improvement every company should make to their work at height program, what would it be? I suppose it's a difficult one, but maybe there is a key one.
There's a very big key one. Let's do proper fall protection plans.
100%.
And simple, not complicated things.
All right, Octavia, what is the reasonable time it should normally take to rescue someone?
That's a cool question. So depending, we've seen people try and use equipment that is very complicated. It can be 20 minutes. There's devices out there that can be done within 3 minutes. So
right.
It all depends.
How often should the rescue plan be reviewed?
So same concept as your fall protection plan. So what we do is we do it either annually, or after there's an incident, or after there's structural change. So whichever of those happens first.
First, yeah. Elaine asked for a technician working in a turbine. Where will the best option be to keep the fall protection plan?
Look, you don't need it with you at every single moment. So I think before
Yeah.
you ascend the wind turbine, to go through it is quite important, and that should cover everything you need to know when you're up there.
Right. Tembe Lila is quite active here this morning. From your experience investigating fall incidents, what are the 3 most critical failures that delay successful rescue, and how can safety officers proactively address them?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just like I said, I mean, walking around and asking where the rescue kit is, 1, nobody knows. Or they know, but it's not accessible. 2 is asking where the rescue plan is. And then 3 is the fall protection plan, because if the fall protection plan is exercised properly, we shouldn't have falls.
Right. Kabu again is asking, many sites have fall protection equipment, but not all have dedicated rescue teams. Based on real incidents, what is the maximum acceptable rescue time for a suspended worker? I think we covered that. And how should organizations determine whether they need on-site rescue capabilities rather than determine or rather rely on emergency services?
Yeah, emergency services shouldn't be a consideration. Emergency services are there for the medical, your people coming.
The result,
Yeah.
the result of the injury, sustained. Yeah. Right. What training is needed to become a rescue personnel member? I think you covered it in your slide, but if you can.
So 22995 is the unit standard, but you need more than the unit standard. It needs to be site specific.
Right. What is the time allowed for rescue team to access the elevated position to render rescue services to the trauma patient? I think it's obviously as quick as possible, but
yeah, as fast as you can, but safely.
Yeah. Monica says, is it necessary to be certified for height work as a maintenance worker who once a while work on a flat roof?
Yeah, the moment you leave the ground, you need to be trained.
Okay.
Or the moment you put yourself in a full rest position, sorry.
Full rest position now. If I buy rescue kits from your company, Protector, obviously, do you provide training and operations for the systems? I can only imagine, yes.
For sure.
Right. Gerardo says, what is the unit standard number, Dylan, that you referred to? I think you just mentioned it.
22995. That's the entry level rescue.
Okay. The next one comes from Nabi Singh. Can a safety officer inspect safety harnesses?
A competent person can inspect, and it depends. So it depends how competent they are. If you want subject matter experts, so SME inspections, which is more an annual inspection, probably not. But yeah, if they're competent and they understand how the devices work. Okay.
And just let's remind ourselves that the Department of Employment and Labour do have a definition for competency on their website. We've also shared it to our members. If you search the SIOS website, it's not always just SACWA unit standard training or that, but also the competency test that DEL puts there. Right. Daniel says, why are the rescue kits not mandatory for all sites where working at heights are taking place? This is not even made mention of in any or many fall protection plans or RAs.
Yeah. So probably because of the first statement I made, which is it doesn't happen frequently. So usually we only correct it once it hurts us.
Right. Kenneth says, do you guys offer physical training? I think the answer is yes. Right. Yes. Mattel says, if you outsource the WFH activities other than requesting the FPP medicals, logs, etc. from the contractor, what are your other responsibilities to ensure compliance on the site as a client?
Make sure that people are safe. I think that's first and foremost. Like, yes, you need to tick all those compliance boxes, but make sure that whatever they're submitting makes sense, and that's going to keep the people safe.
So that would be like a client have a contractor and obviously enter a 37 agreement with them. And then obviously they need to first of all check and produce competency and equipment check, etc. Although the contractor is ultimately responsible, I presume.
They are, but the reason I caution away from saying what's the documentation or what's the tick boxes that need to be done is because it's too easy to do that. People are working on it. And they are going to be exposed to a fall. You need to be sure that the person has done everything they can to keep that person safe on your site.
Right, right. Gareth, am I correct to say that we're on the last question?
That's correct, Niels.
Oh, wow. Okay. You see, multitasking is not my expertise here because I was looking at the 61. Meantime, it was attendees thanking us for, or thanking you guys, Dylan, for a great presentation. So here's the last question. It's quite a lengthy one. It's by Stefanos Janneke. I do not fully agree with the practice of allowing individuals to plan developers solely based on completing a course. In my opinion, the role requires a strong practical understanding of the work environment, equipment, and operational challenges involved. I believe that individuals with hands-on field experience, such as a qualified rope access technicians, are better suited to be developed into plan developers. Their practical exposure to the equipment, work methods, and real-world site conditions provide valuable insight that cannot be gained through classroom training alone. While formal training is important, it should ideally complement a practical experience rather than replacing it. Combating technical knowledge with field experience would help and ensure the plans are realistic, effective, and aligned with the actual work being performed. I would say that's a great statement.
90% of it. There is one misconception, and Stefanos is 100% right that people need to develop the plan that they are specialists in. If somebody is a specialist in ladders, they should be developing that. If they're a specialist in fall protection. But we can't say that somebody is more knowledgeable because they're a rope access technician. Because rope access is its own business. And just being a rope access technician doesn't make you able to install certified lifelines, for instance. So we need to differentiate them. There's 9 chambers in the IWH, and I think that's a good gauge. If somebody's doing rope access work, the fall protection planner should have a rope access background. Fall arrest work, fall arrest background.
100%. Dylan, thank you very much. Once again, great presentation. We've done 2, there's 4 to come. Do you know what is the next topic going to be? Have you worked it out yet?
Might be wrong, but I think it's dropping tools, because that's quite a big topic.
Okay, dropping tools. So those that are online or still online, over 400 of you, that will be the next topic. As per usual, check out your newsletters that SIOS sends through. We will advertise it timelessly, and do not miss out the 3rd one in the series of 6 presented to you by Dylan from Protector. Dylan, thank you very much. Much appreciated. I just want to make 1 or 2 announcements and then we'll close off. Thank you very much. Until the next one.
Thank you so much again. Ciao.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder that this webinar was recorded or have been recorded. It will be on the SIOS YouTube channel. SIOS members will receive a link to it, although you can just go to the YouTube channel and view it. The link to that, as well as the copy of the presentation, will be forwarded to all SIOS members, so you can reference it again or maybe make use of it or go over it again. This webinar was CPD verified by SIOS for 1 point. You will receive an attendance email via the Zoom platform that confirm that you attended it. You can do with it whatever you like. You can try with your professional body if you're not with SIOS to try and claim CPD points from other professional bodies, because we're not the only professional body around. And thank you for your participation, and thank you to Gareth, our membership and communications manager in the background, for handling all the technical aspects. I think it was once again a brilliant, smooth webinar. And until I don't think I missed anything, and until we see you next time, which will be part 3 of this webinar, unless the Occupational Health and Safety Bill is promulgated, that will get priority, and we'll try and get the Chief Inspector straight away to come and do a talk, or even the construction regulations. If that draft construction regulations is promulgated, we will obviously immediately arrange for one from a person from the Department of Employment and Labour to do a webinar. But at this stage, our next one will be on part 3 of the Working at Height Safety. Be safe, everybody. Until we see you next time. Cheerio.